I love this station idea, and this was shared from the Teaching Middle School podcast. And they were talking about two different stations that they could do before or after Halloween, just to kind of have the kids doing something that's fun, engaging, but it's also a little high level. And so the first station is students will listen. They're going to listen to a podcast. Once they listen to the podcast, the ladies in the episode, they talked about you could have the students analyze the podcast. However, that would take a little bit more work because you would need to create something that the students kind of would use as a guide. And then the students would write a possible ending to the podcast. So right here is the podcast episode. And what I loved about this podcast is this is the like actual website, but right here you can download the audio file. And so I downloaded it and I added it to WeVideo. And so just a quick thing, you might want to listen to it though before you give it to your students, is it talks about this Amber. And Amber is about 20 years old and she moved into an apartment all by herself. And on her first night, she started to hear all these weird sounds. She started to see in her fridge things were missing. And what they find out is up in her attic, there was a sleeping bag and a book and some other things. And they really do think that some type of guy or some type of human was living in her apartment. So it really goes into detail about what it kind of sounded like and stuff. And so what I did is I downloaded this episode, and at the beginning and the end, there was a lot of ads that were kind of in this podcast episode. So what I did is I cut it. So this is without the ads at the beginning and the end, like the credits kind of stuff of like more information about their podcast. So I cropped that out. Then it also talks about her being in a tub and naked. So depending on your students, you might not want that part. So right here, this is all before the tub. So it's 8 minutes and 50 seconds. You could just have this playing, and then the kids would have to make inferences about what happens using the evidence from that 8 minutes and 50 seconds. So again, you could just show this part. Also, if you wanted to, you could do this part and then share the rest of the story. This does have the tub part where it does talk about her being naked. And the guy is in her bedroom and she never sees the guy, but she can hear him. And so then she calls the cops and all that kind of stuff. And that's when the cops find the sleeping bag in her attic. So right here, again, this is before, and then the kids could stop the audio and then they could finish the rest of the story. Or you could just have them listen all the way through and then they kind of change the ending of their story or maybe what could happen. So again, here is all of the different audio files that you could pick from. Once you do that, that's that one station. So again, students will write. You could have them write on a piece of paper. You can have them type it in a Google document. Wherever you kind of wanted them to write their ending of this story to this podcast, you could have them do that. You could also, if you wanted to practice public speaking, have them record the rest of the podcast. Maybe they partner up and they're working with someone else. So multiple options when working on this station. The next one is really, really cool. And I was working with Leanne Yoakum, who had this book. It's part of the Springboard curriculum, Mysteries of Harris. And it shows these really cool photos in the book. So students will work with a partner and then they'll come up with a story based on their photo. So right here, where the pencil is, I would assign this in Google Classroom and everybody gets a copy. So right here, they come up with a title, the tone, they come up with the mood, everything. They come up with 10 different words, and then they write a summary. So this is using 8 parts. It's an Edu protocol. Once they do that, they can add Mote. And so they'll add Mote because this is like their workspace. They're going to copy and paste their summary right here to slide 3. Once they copy and paste, they're going to record it using Mote. And so they just click. They have about a minute to record their podcast episode. And then the groups are going to listen to each of the stories because we want them, again, to use a tone that is appropriate for their story. And once they do that, they're going to drag which image they think went with that story. And then they're going to provide evidence and reasoning so they can highlight the actual story and do that. You could also assign this after students complete, as everybody kind of gets a copy, or you could do this in a small group and have those conversations with students about, okay, they said this at this part in the story, or they talked about this part. So again, students will write, publish it, and then they're going to read it to practice that tone, and then everybody listens to that file, and then they use their evidence when debating which photo goes with what. And I just found these images on Google. I just did a quick Google search. And so if I'm missing one, feel free to add it to your template if you're using one with your students. So again, they'll partner up and then they have to guess which one and use evidence and reasoning to really explain why that photo went with that text. Okay, so again, should be really fun stations. And then I'll add the video right here afterwards. But again, here are all of the different episodes. Here is the listen. And then you're able to have your students really focus in on some of these writing type of high level activities.